pronunciation.
This meeting is being recorded.
Juno Zovic. He is going to talk about the certification aspects of heavy ion therapy machines. And he works since 2013 at Medostron, the Center for Ion Therapy and Research. And he is part of the Medical Device Affairs Group and senior expert for medical device regulation and medical software. So, Mohammed.
Hi, can you hear me?
Okay, yes, perfectly. Hello, nice to see you.
Hello from Austria, and thank you for invitation for this course.
So the floor is yours.
Introduce me. So I'm working in the company which already produced the therapy accelerator, and it is CE marked and already in use. The one interesting thing is the Medostron is company which is at the same time manufacturer and also the user of a medical device. So inside the company, we have an ambulatory place where we treat our patient. And technical question, should I share the presentation or it will be from your side?
Yes, please. Yes, please.
Okay, just a second, please. Can you see it now?
Can see, yes.
Okay, so I will talk about the certification aspects of heavy ion therapy machines. I think I can skip this slide. So yeah, we already saw how to build very good machines, and there is a question how to use this machine as a medical device. How we can prove that the patient will not be harmed during the radiation, or can the operating and service personnel use the device in a safe way? What is the environmental impact of electromagnetic field and so? And to have all of these proofs, there is a CE marking. CE mark means conformity European, and it's defined as a European Union's mandatory conformity marking for regulating the goods sold within European Economic Area since 1985. But just one side note, please be careful. There are some other CE signs on the market, like, for example, China export. They have the same abbreviation, but construction of the sign is a little bit different. And the CE mark serves as a declaration from the manufacturer that their product complies with the essential requirements of the relevant European health, safety, and environmental legislation laid out in different product directives. Once product has been awarded the CE marking, then it's able to use for patient treatment as a medical device or to move freely within the European Free Trade Association and the European Union. Manufacturers, they act actually as a main role in this process. Manufacturers are responsible for checking and providing proof that their product meets European regulation requirements towards safety, health, and environmental protection. Manufacturers need to carry out a conformity assessment, need to set up technical documentation, to issue European Union Declaration of Conformity, and to affix the CE mark to the product. Only once everything is prepared, then the product can be used on the market. As an identification, manufacturer must have a document called manufacturer data sheet. It can be printed document or in electronic form, and it provides detail about the company and manufacturing product. You can see as an example this manufacturer data sheet for Medostron and MAPTA as a medical particle therapy accelerator. But there is even ISO standard which outlines symbols used for making this document up. Also, each medical device must be registered, and it will become a unique device identification, this UDI, which consists of two parts. This UDI, DI, it is identification of a manufacturer, and UDI, PI is identification of the product. And that this document must be always up to date. If you have a new version of the same device, then the manufacturer data sheet must be updated. You can also see here for a MAPTA, it's already version 1.03. Regarding, let's say, law for a medical industry, there are two main types. There are regulations and directives. Regulations are applicable immediately. So as soon as the new regulation is announced, then each manufacturer needs to apply it on an existing or a new medical device. Directives, they are a little bit different. They are usually implemented via national laws. Now, for example, there is a low voltage directive, which is in Austria implemented by Austrian Elektrotechnik Gesetz. It is on manufacturer to find out which regulations or directives are applicable for a particular device. As a main regulation for medical device industry, there is a European Medical Device Regulation, shortly called MDR, which is a starting point for each CE marking of a medical device. Compliance with this regulation is mandatory for manufacturers that want to market or sell their products in the European Economic Area. As an important directive for therapy accelerators, there is this European Low Voltage Directive, which ensures that electrical equipment provides a high level of protection. It outlines essential safety requirements for electrical equipment operating with a voltage of 50 to 1000 volt for alternating current and 75 to 1500 volt for direct current. For everything above, there is a high voltage regulation. Also, very important for therapy accelerators, there is a directive for electromagnetic compatibility, which ensures that electrical and electronic equipment does not generate or is not affected by electromagnetic disturbance. Then machinery directive defines essential health and safety requirements of general application, which permits the free movement of machinery. It's applicable for machinery, safety components, for example, lifting accessories, removable mechanical transmission devices, partially completed machinery, and some other devices. Then there is a European directive for protection against the dangers arising from exposure to ionizing radiation. I think I do not need to explain a lot about this. And also very important is directive on restriction of hazardous substances, shortly called ROHS, which is a set of rules on the restriction of use of hazardous substances in electrical and electronic equipment. It also defines requirements, for example, for disposal of waste, electrical and electronic equipment. Of course, there are some more directives, but to list all of them, it will be too much now. Next to directives, there are also a lot of standards. Compliance to a standard is not legally required, but usually standards reflect the state of the art in the field of concern. Then application of standards make technical solutions and processes comparable. Compliance to a standard is commonly accepted as precondition for approval of compliance to legal regulations. Usually, word standard is associated to a complex set of requirements. But honestly, some standards are really complex, but they are very helpful. Instead of searching and looking what you need to do with the standard, you have a list of tasks, requirements, which you need to fulfill. And of course, not all requirements are applicable to the device. It's the same with the regulation and directive. If something is not applicable, it can be skipped with documented rationale why it is not applicable. The rationale needs to be stated, of course, by manufacturer. There are different groups of standards. For example, there are process standards, which are good practices for management processes. For example, for quality management, there are ISO 9001 or ISO 13485 for medical industry. Then for risk management for medical devices, there is ISO 14971 and IC 62304 for medical software life cycle. They're ensuring that the result of process fulfills defined requirements. We have also some technical standards which are defining state of the art. For example, DICOM standards for digital imaging and communication, which ensures interoperability, compatibility, comparability, and usually they are linked to safety aspects. Then there is a group of safety standards, and for electrical equipment, very important is IC 60601 family, where technical implementation of a requirement means appropriate risk mitigation measure, and compliance to requirement is acceptable residual risk, because we cannot always minimize the risk to zero. We need just to define what we can accept, and then we continue. Then for the testing, also there are some standards, like for example, IC 62353, which defines common acceptance of testing results and make checking of test reports easier. Medical device regulation gives a few possibilities for conformity assessment. One of them is via sampling method, which means manufacturer need to send to authority one example of a group of produced devices. In case of accelerator, it's hardly possible. So there is another possibility to have established a quality management system for medical industry. This QMS covers all aspects of medical device lifecycle, from design until the final uninstallation. The purpose of quality management system is to improve the quality of the medical device and related services. There is a standard ISO 13485, which lays down requirements for the quality management system for medical devices. It is a little bit similar to ISO 9001, but it's extended to cover also some additional aspects. And this process need to cover processes like, for example, development process, production, service delivery, risk management, which is very important in medical device industry. Then document control, internal audits, management reviews, corrective and preventive actions, handling of resources, including human resources, infrastructure, equipment, locations of device installations, and communication with the customers. Here you can see example of processes at Medalstrom. We have 26 standard operating procedures and processes, and to maintain the quality management system and conformity of a medical device, we have two groups, quality management and regulatory affairs group, and we have 14 people in total in these two groups. So it's let's say, a bit of work to keep everything up to date. Product testing, it's a demonstration the device can safely perform during its intended use. Extensive design validation testing, performance testing, toxicity and chemical analysis, and sometimes human factors or even clinical testing needs to be done before we start using the device. Conformity assessment is a procedure that demonstrates whether the requirements of the medical device regulation for the medical device have been met. It must be performed with a positive result before we start using the medical device. Also, if we change a medical device that is already in use on the market, in a way that we add new functionality or we have a, for example, change in design, the conformity assessment needs to be repeated. Also, as a side note, during describing purpose of the medical device, manufacturer defines intended use. The intended use is described in the user instructions, and the user or operator is trained about it. Manufacturer guarantees conformity only for the intended use. For any kind of off-label use, manufacturer is not responsible. It is on a user. Also, one more example from Medostron. So you can see some of test reports required for conformity assessment. And the documents must be always up to date depending on the changes. So you can see there is already version 21 for some of them. So it's not that we can prepare once and then just use it. One of main non-functional components of the medical device is the technical documentation. The medical device regulation outlines content and requirements for preparation of the technical documentation. It contains a general description of the product, including any planned variants along with the intended use, the design specification, including standards which will be applied, then a result of the risk assessment, description of solutions adapted to fulfill the essential requirements, standards referred in the some requirements of the MDR, then techniques used to control and verify the design, the processes, systematic measures which will be adopted during the design phases, compatibility, interoperability reports, and similar things. So, for example, just index of the technical documentation for medical therapy accelerator and Medostron contains 500 pages. On each page, there are approximately 30 documents listed, so you can easily calculate the amount of the technical documents. Luckily, the technical documentation doesn't need to be printed out. It can be used via any kind of a document management system. And now one more example. It is an index of the technical documentation prepared according to medical device regulation rules. And now one can ask who is going to check the technical documentation. So there are organizations called notified bodies. Notified body is usually a private company which is accredited by a government, and that company takes over tasks on behalf of national authorities. According to the medical device regulation, medical device manufacturers have to involve notified body in the conformity assessment process. It is on manufacturer to choose notified body. There are no strict rules. So there are several companies in the area, and you can just choose one which fits your needs. And typical tasks of notified bodies is certification of the quality management system according to ISO 13485 and according to medical device regulation. Then they do review of technical documentation, including risk management files, software files, usability files, and they also do check of compliance with the legal requirements, regulations, and directives. They also do assessment of clinical evaluations. So once we have documented regulatory and user requirements, we have documented architecture, design, we have testing reports, so everything is prepared. There is a question, who will make a CE certification? For the European Union, there is no CE certification. So unlike in USA, there is no someone like FDA, which will provide certificate for medical device. Also notified body will not write declaration of conformity. The European Union's declaration of conformity is important legal document in which the manufacturer declares the conformity of their medical device. So at the end, manufacturer writes this document and states that everything is done in a proper way and guarantee that during use, according to specified intended use, nothing will happen. Minimum of information on the declaration of conformity is information about the device, about the conformity of device, information about the manufacturer, and some other information like place and date of the issue, name and function of person who is signing the declaration, and of course the signature of that person. So you can see here as an example declaration of conformity for Medastron Therapy Accelerator MAPTA, and this is the CE marking for the device. Now also someone can ask if there is no any certification, what is this 4-digit number next to CE mark? This is actually identification number of notified body involved in the conformity process. And you can see here the example of design and verification of a medical device using a V model. So start is on the product definition, and also next to product definition, the manufacturer needs to identify regulatory requirements and also market and user requirements. Then based on that, the technical specification of the device, including risk control measures, need to be established. Here we look for applicable standards for the particular device. Then this technical specification needs to be spread over subsystems. And again, the risk control measures needs to be in place. There are again some applicable standards which will help writing requirements for the subsystems. Then we go a little bit deeper with a specification of on the component levels, and again risk control measures. So one more time, the applicable standards needs to be taken into account. At the end, the smallest part is a unit, which is defined by the manufacturer, and specification starts there. Once the development is finished, the starting will start. The first units are testing, so we perform some unit tests. Then we go up to next level. We do type and site acceptance test. After putting together components and subsystems, there are integration tests on the place. And here development stops, it is frozen. So now the real acceptance testing starts. First, verification tests are done against the technical specification of the device. And at the end, validation testing is done against the product definition and the user requirements. Once all testing is finished, everything passed, then device can be used. Of course, before the use, the testing reports must be shown to the notified body, and after approval, the declaration of conformity is issued and device can be used. It is much easier if CE marking process is done in parallel to the design and development. Of course, it's possible to do CE marking on the top of development, but effort will be much higher. And at the end, there is the short comparison of CE mark for European Union and against the FDA approval process for the USA market. One big difference is that FDA approval requires a full clinical trial, where for CE marking, it's only clinical evaluation, which is based on published data for existing equivalent devices. In case of CE marking, the manufacturer need to conduct post-market clinical follow-up studies once the CE mark is obtained. And also, as a big difference, CE mark is recognized almost globally. So in addition to being valid in all countries of the European Union, in a lot of other countries, the CE mark is recognized as valid. Then the big difference is documentation. In case of FDA, the documentation required from investigators is much less efficient than the documentation for a CE mark. The review cycle is about 3 times longer in case of FDA review. And there are almost always the more rounds of questions with FDA approval submissions than the case with the CE mark. So I hope I have managed to bring the CE marking process a little bit closer to you. Is there any questions or comments? So I understand usually nobody likes documentation. It's not funny like some other topics.
I actually have a question for you. Looking back after going through
Nicholas, there's a question by a student.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't realize that. Yeah. Matthias, would you like to give us your question, Matthias, please?
Yes, please. I have a question. How many people are attached to the process that you did? So how many people worked on it, and how long did it take you, and how many people are still attached to it? So if you prepare new stuff, get, for example, new ion sources installed and stuff, how many people are working on it currently?
So there are actually 2 parts. One is the people which do CE marking, and they do follow-up of the processes. And at the end, testing requirements and a lot of documentation, this needs to be done by experts. So it's not so easy to say how much effort is required. It depends on the size of the device, depends on number of components. So at the end, each component needs to be described, and each integration requires integration testing. So as you saw in some previous slides, our technical file contains about 15,000 documents. And for maintenance of CE marking and quality management systems, we have 14 people. So we have a change process in place. Each change need to be checked before we do it. First, if it makes sense, then what is impact on device? What is a risk if we change something? And if it's a big change like putting additional ion source, then we needed to send technical documentation to our notified body. They will do audit, and then once everything is tested, approved, we can use it. So we have 9 people just for CE marking and let's say working processes, including risk management, change management, and follow up on medical software.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Kristaps.
Yeah, thank you for the talk. So the question I wanted to ask is sort of a bit related to your expertise in Midostron. So since Midostron now, they were based from the PIMS projects at CERN that were just like a bunch of technologies not intentionally designed to be a medical device. Are there any troubles associated if we go that route, if we start something that's not intended as a medical device from the beginning, if we start from technologies? Are there some lessons learned when creating Midostron for that?
Yes, actually, I also started at CERN. I was there two years working on Midostron project, and as you explained, it was a development of an industrial device. Then first kind of a showstopper was when experts heard about certification process, about some additional overhead to prepare devices as a medical device. Yeah, it's much easier if everything is done in parallel, but not always is possible to start. Usually you need a prototyping, and nobody will document prototyping. You have no time, you have no enough resources. And then if everything works, you would use your prototype as a final product. So Midostron did in similar way. So after some years of development, the CE marking process started. We had some documents, but not everything was prepared. So it was more people involved to find out what is still missing, what needs to be done. And at the end, we managed to describe each component, to do each test and have each report. And then we managed to have a CE mark and put the device on the market. So it's quite a big difference in effort, but it's possible to do it also on top of development.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
There's a question in the chat from Maria. She has problems with the mic. So her question is just a curiosity, how long does the process take of getting the CE marking? Approximately, I guess, of course, depends on.
So in case of therapy accelerator, the process takes several years. It's not so easy to say exact period, but you can count 3 to 4 years for sure. And what we also had after getting the CE marking, the authority issued new regulation. Before was a medical device directive, then it was a change to medical device regulation. And it was also a challenging task to redo CE marking according to new regulation. So it took additional year for that. Of course, it was not full working time for 10 people, but it was quite some effort.
Okay, thank you. I guess that answers Laurie's question. I guess since we don't see anything on the chat or Slack, then
I think
that's
Nicholas.
yeah, Nicholas.
If there are no questions from our students, maybe I can ask you a question. In those 2 to 4 years when you were waiting for the certification, I imagine you weren't just waiting as mid-Austron. I imagine you were doing machine time, improving, optimizing the beam, commissioning. Am I correct? I mean, because you cannot change or upgrade the machine, right? If you're seeking.
Actually, I meant 4 years to prepare documentation and to have a certificate. So you can also send technical files in stages to notified bodies, so you do not lose a lot of time. So
and looking back, what could you have done to speed up the process?
It's to parallelize the development process and the CE marking process. So it was not a waiting time. It was just continuing with development. You know, we have several treatment rooms. So we first finished certification of one treatment room, and during preparing of missing parts and waiting for a certificate, commissioning of other rooms were in place. And just review of technical documentation and audit by notified body issuing certificates, it takes up to 6 months. Of course, it depends on the issues. If they found some major issues, then the manufacturer must fix it and request a new audit. If it's just some small issues, then you have, for example, a month of time to correct it and just send the report to them. So this waiting time, which is just a waiting, it's up to 6 months.
Thank you.
May I, Nicholas?
Of course, Nadia.
Okay, so Mohammed, thank you very much. So following on from the question from Christoph's, and also I see that Sandra is also online, and you know that there are new ideas now with this NIM study and maybe a helium machine and then CS and in the Balkan area. So with mid-Austron, having learned the idea that of course we were not, I mean, CERN, we were thinking we didn't know much about CE marking and medical devices and so on. Having learned the challenges and the fact that you can do things in parallel as well, I mean, what could one do and give advice to, for example, people like Christoph's team and the Balkan CS project? How could we in a bigger word, what could we do differently as the machine is being constructed, thought about, designed? It would be really interesting to hear your feeling about if there is going to be a CS design or a helium machine design, both from you and from Sandro. What sort of things to bear in mind? Would really appreciate hearing your thoughts about that.
So from the CE marking point of view, there is no big difference. It's more about the testing. So we need to fulfill requirements to provide test reports. What we test and how do we test, it's on us to define. So if we say we use helium, then we should find out requirements which are applicable to this type of machine and this type of a source, and then just do testing for this. So having different sources, it makes almost no difference for CE marking.
And
again, the easiest way is to start talking at the beginning to see what will be intended use, what will be list of requirements from regulatory, what will be additional effort, and so. So yeah, again, I will just repeat, the suggestion is to parallelize the processes development and the marking as much as possible.
So I don't know much about these things. Maybe I'm not very clear at all. So what is the difference of being registered as a medical device versus CE marking? Sorry, I'm totally ignorant of these things.
To use something as a medical device, the manufacturer need to provide declaration of conformity, which is a kind of a C label. And to be able to provide this declaration, manufacturer needs to check regulatory requirements for this medical device and confirm that all these requirements are fulfilled. And for different medical devices, of course, the requirements are different. We can have the syringe, for example, as a medical device, and it's quite simple. And we can have one big like therapy accelerator. And regarding the parallelizing of processes, for example, if you design and develop a Faraday cup, you have a device, you do a lot of testing and so. And at the end, to use this as a component of a medical device, you need to have documented test reports. Also, not only test reports, but design of the Faraday cup. And maybe the group which will do design, manufacturing, and testing will not have time to do everything in a proper way. So there will be some sketches, but at the end, we need to have a proper design document. So this is an example where the additional effort can be required if you do CE marking on top of development. I hope it's a little bit more clear now.
Thank you very much. Actually, because I think it's very important for some of the new teams who are thinking about having the future machines, so that we don't go into the same problem of, you know, delay and taking time. And as you said, better to start doing things in parallel than in consequences. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Just a question on just the point that you mentioned in the answer of the previous questions. You sort of said we can choose the set of testing, like the tests for validation, that you choose them yourselves. Is that really true, or are there like still, like if we just take some, I don't know, specific components, there should be some standardized requirements for testing, no? Or it's like sort of there's some just guidelines on like the idea how we should do the testing?
There are guidelines, you're right, but usually any kind of a standard or any document cannot cover all cases. So you have very wide area of medical devices, from simple things to the very complicated, including artificial intelligence and so. So none of standards can cover everything. So there are some requirements, and then they need to be interpreted and fulfilled from the manufacturer. So yeah, it is on manufacturer to find out what will be the easiest way of testing. For some components, for some part, there are, as you said, the standardized tests. They can just be used, but for some of them, it's on experts to write how the test will be performed, what will be testing environment, what will be tools used for testing, and so. So not so easy to find everything somewhat documented.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Sandro has, please.
Yeah, Manjit, you trigger me with a question. I was just jumping in, and then I hear you calling me. No, I just want to comment on the fact that I think that what has been shown by Muhammad is clearly that you need organize, since to be fast, that was your question, to be efficient, you need to organize since the beginning your work, taking into account that you have to document it. And normally technical people, maybe engineers a bit more, but physicists for sure not, are not used to make this kind of detailed work. They need to make the project, they need to collect the data, they need to keep track in a very well documented way of what they are doing. This is fundamental. I mean, you have seen how many papers, how many documents are within the database of MedAustron, and now is not very far from that. So to really be efficient, you need to structure yourself, your team in a way that all this is very well organized, kept, and documented. And this is the only way to, let's say, to be ready for getting the CE marking. Another point that it was working very well for CNAO, since we were somehow the first center, let's say, that was built on the PIMS, let's say, design. We started soon making interaction with the notified body. In our case, the notified body was the technical body of the Ministry of Health. So it was identified since the beginning, and we had a very close relationship with them. Actually, we were at a certain moment even forced to make a clinical trial on the patients, not only so documentation to get the CE marking, but also a clinical trials, more like an FDA approval. And this was somehow mandatory to prove that we were able to reproduce somehow the protocols in use at the time in Japan mainly, and also in Germany, because there were not other examples. It's true that if we are going to duplicate the center, or let's say new technology but very similar to MedAustron or CNAO, we can rely very much on our experience, but still the team that is dealing with the documentation and the culture of the people that is dealing with the realization of the components need to be organized since the beginning.
Sandro, thank you very much. Actually, that's what I was thinking about, because you've heard recently that there are some ideas both from the Baltic region and from the Balkan region, and we should learn from our, well, your experiences actually, in order to make sure that the teams that are going to do that they take that into account and try to accelerate the process rather than taking the extra time which had to be taken. That was why I asked the question.
You are right, Manjit, because often, I mean, these kind of things you tend to forget, or maybe you are not aware that they take time. Mohammed was saying 4 years, but these 4 years in parallel that need to have really on the back already a lot of work done. So if you don't structure yourself since the beginning, then you lose time. You're right. I mean, this is a crucial topic to be taken into account, to be fast and to arrive at the right moment with the right documentation ready for submitting to the authorities.
And I will just one more time underline what Sandra said. Sometimes it's really challenging to explain to experts importance of the documentation. I know everybody likes to work on the building something development, but in case of medical device, we also need to think that the person is sitting on other side and can be really harmed if something goes wrong. And also without harming somebody, if something doesn't work, it's much easier to do debugging if you have documented everything properly, which is quite important in this case.
I'm sorry, Mohammed, I didn't follow all your presentation, but for example, in this case, risk analysis is also a crucial topic in getting approvals. And the risk analysis is also a technicality that is not trivial to, you need to be aware of what you are doing, to analyze, to really explore all the possibilities, to put in place means to reduce the risk, the probability, and so on. And this is, of course, as you correctly say, when a patient is on the other side of the wall, this is of crucial importance.
Yes, also downtime and losing a treatment is a risk for a patient. And by the way, we have 2 risk managers just for maintenance of the CE mark, and they are really fully busy with their tasks.
Okay. I think we can close this session.